So hello, we'll let the others trickle in as they come. My name is Ayana Sundari, and welcome to Finding and Creating Safe Spaces Online for People of Color. First, I'd like to begin because we're all coming in from something, from work or family, children, or just life. And so if we could start by just taking 3 deep breaths and coming into this space together. So planting your feet, if you're sitting in a chair, sitting up nice and tall wherever you are, and closing your eyes and trying to relax your shoulders and your arms. And relax the muscles of your face. Start by letting your chin come down to your chest. Just allowing the back of the neck to open. Bring your right ear over to your right shoulder, trying to let the shoulder relax and just let the head hang. Bring your left ear over to your left shoulder. Then bring the head back into neutral. Let's take 3 deep breaths together, in through the nose and out through the mouth. Deep breath in. Long exhale. Let go of the day. Deep breath in. Long exhale. Let's try to release some of this week.
Sinus trouble.
Deep breath in. Long exhale, coming into the space together. When you're ready, give yourself a big stretch. Stretch your arms. Roll the neck if you need to. Wiggle fingers, wiggle toes.
Gee, let's go out for dinner and come back. Maybe she'll start.
Wonderful. And we'll get started. So thank you for joining me this evening. We are in the midst of a pandemic and a civil rights movement. Things are extremely heavy right now. And I think that it's important that we start to pay attention to our mental, our physical, and our emotional health. As people of color, I think as allies of people of color, it's vital to learn how to support those in their mental, physical, and emotional health. When I think of my own family and my own friends, my friends who are people of color, my family, I know that we've long learned to have certain conversations, not in mixed company. We have those conversations in our homes. We have those conversations among our close friends. We've learned that it is difficult to have honest conversations with people that don't mirror us, right? I think that we're in a time right now where we sit in spaces, whether it's at work that's now on Zoom, that's now in our homes, or it's in conversations that are now not just our friends that look like us, but our friends that want to help us and that ask questions, that we're often asked to hold space, teach, defend, and toe the line at the same time. And it can be really uncomfortable. I think that we're in a time where racists have become emboldened. The news is everywhere and we can't escape it. I think when it comes to our online platforms, we're seeing that not only are they posting their own things, but they're making comments in our posts as well. And for those of us who choose to stand up for ourselves or who choose to celebrate our own people of color in our community, we receive messages from them in our direct messages. So we're at a place now where it becomes difficult to avoid what used to happen outside of our home, because for those of us who are sitting in our home, and due to COVID, most of us are, everything is coming closer. And so I think it's important to learn how to navigate these spaces and to support each other in how to navigate these spaces. And so I want to take a moment first to use our chat feature and for you to take a moment to take stock of where you are right now mentally. where you are in this moment today. And you can chat in one word, you can chat in a short phrase, but I'd like us to do that and then to take a moment to read what people have written. So feel free. Thank you for sharing that. And if you'd like to continue to share in the chat, you may, feel free to. I think we're seeing a common theme, right, of exhausted, sad. We do see hopeful and optimistic, but we see disappointed and frustrated, and the sentiment seems to be shared and collective. And so I'd like to think about this idea of collective grief and collective traumas. And why I wanted you to write this into the chat is because I think it's important to recognize what others are feeling and not just what we are feeling, right? To hear what other people are dealing with. I think it's important for our allies to know the truth of what it's like. I think it's important for us to speak truth to what it feels like and to not weaponize positivity against ourselves. And so when I think about this idea of collective grief and collective trauma, and that there are 28 people right now sitting on this call that have all shared similar words, then to me, it seems imperative that we collectively help each other heal, right? That we collectively help each other navigate this time. I've spent 15 years working in wellness. And one of the things that I focus on a lot is how emotional trauma shows up physically in the body, and how what we don't pay attention to begins to manifest itself. And so I'm going to share a slide. I'm not so great at sharing slides, so give me a second to share my screen. But I'd like to share something with you. Nod if you can see that. Can you see that? Okay. So our bodies. These are sentiments that have come up from clients that I work with. Every time I'm on a Zoom work call and Black Lives Matter comes up, I clench my teeth and I wait for it to be over. Let's think about that sentiment of that's that conversation that we talked about in the beginning about having to have certain conversations that we were used to being very open and honest with in our own company are now happening in mixed company and happening in work. So how does that show up in the body? Headaches and shoulder pain, right? Imagine if somebody is constantly carrying that in their body, what that shows up with. I'm sad every time I scroll through my feed and I read about another dead body. I think we're all feeling that. How many of these people that we see look like our uncles and our fathers and our brothers, our sisters and our cousins, and what that is like to scroll through and to see people that look like your mirror. So how does that show up in the body? Stomach discomfort, gut issues. I'm noticing that when I'm stressed, I tend to hold my breath. I see that with myself all the time, and I teach breath work. And I still notice that when I'm tense, I'm holding my breath. So what does that do in your body? it disrupts the nervous system, and it breeds anxiety. And so I want us to take a few moments to move and to breathe. And then I asked you guys to bring pen and paper, because I'd like to spend a few moments free writing about what we've noticed coming up in our bodies over the last few months. So we're gonna start by standing. I'm not gonna stand up, but you guys are gonna stand up. And stand with your feet underneath your hips, and let your knees be soft, let your butt be soft. Let your arms relax. Begin to rock gently from your toes towards your heels. So it's like you're playing with the weight distribution. And rock side to side a bit. And then just find the center of your feet and take a deep breath in and a long breath out. Bring the arms up, reaching for the sky, but then let your shoulders relax so they're not up around your ears. And let your hips come all the way to one side, like you're pushing them to one side and your arms push towards the other side. Good, and then inhale up to center and exhale into the other side. So really push the hips away from you. Feel that stretch in the opposite side of the body. And come back through center. Take a deep inhale and then exhale all the way over. Let your fingers touch your toes and let your head go. You might notice how tight it is in the backs of your legs and the backs of your neck. So try to just soften everything. You don't need locked knees. Relax your butt, relax your belly. And take a big breath here.
Not sitting down yet.
And then slowly roll back up, nice and slow. We're gonna take one big circle in each direction. So put your arms up again. And then in your inhale, big circle, move your arms in a circle, move your butt in a circle, move your hips in a circle. See how big you can make that circle as you breathe. Inhale back, exhale forward. One more time, inhale back, exhale forward, and then switch directions. Inhale back and exhale forward, and again, inhale back. And exhale forward, and then just shake out arms. Shake out legs, move your shoulders. Make sounds if you need to. Most of you are muted, so roar like a lion if that's what you feel like you need to do right now. Scream if that's what you need to do right now. Good. And then take a seat when you are ready. So you have a pen and paper with you. If you don't, take time to get that. But I want you to take a few moments to really think about what's been happening in your body. So you're not sharing this. So you don't have to worry about, I'm gonna ask you to screenshot it or anything. But have you been having headaches? Have you been having tummy trouble? Are your periods a mess? Is your appetite a mess? Are you not sleeping? What's showing up for you over the last few months? Just word vomit on a page. What's going on with your body? What's happening with you mentally? We're gonna take a few moments. I'm gonna see if I can play music again. And I'll come back. Can you hear my music?
No.
Okay, I'll share.
Wonder why we can't hear her music.
Do we need a few more minutes? There was no graceful blend out of music, but do we need a few more minutes? Are we okay? So that's for you to hold on to. I think it's important to take time to check in with ourselves to know where we are and what we need. I think what we're starting to recognize in this workshop is that we are online more than ever. Our personal and public lives are now blending together, and the levels of stress that we're dealing with are now impacting many of us physically. So I think it's time for us all to step in. So I'd like to know, what do you think makes a space safe? So there are no wrong answers. If we were thinking about specifically our online spaces, what do you think makes a safe space? So before we get back to our slideshow, I'm going to go around and actually call on people. There are a lot of us, and so I obviously can't get to all of you, but I can probably get to like 10 of you. And maybe it's a word, maybe it's a short phrase, but what you feel like constitutes a safe space. You can either use your little hand emoji on your Zoom, or you can put your hand up. We can do this the old school way, and you can unmute yourself. We're thinking about what constitutes a safe space. Don't be afraid to just throw things out there. Maybe it's vulnerability. Okay, Kevin.
The two words that came to mind were
I can't hear you,
accessibility and
actually.
representation.
Ooh.
Oh no! Hello.
Can we hear him?
Me?
Okay.
No. I'll tape it.
Turn off your video and it'll help.
I guess I
Okay,
cannot hear him is the problem. Let's see. Give me 1 second. I think I have to stop my music, and that's why, because my thing's on mute, right? We're learning. So 1 second, we're gonna figure out how to stop this. Pause. Okay, and then if I go like that, now Kevin, speak.
I was just gonna yes, cool. Accessibility and representation were the two words that kind of kept coming up to me.
Awesome. 4 other people raise their hands. Tamika. Tamakia, I probably just ruined your name, so feel free to tell me that was terrible and then correct me.
It's Tamika.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and confidentiality works for me.
Confidentiality. Bunny?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I'm reading a book called The Culture Code, and they talk about safety in groups and belonging cues, which to me, what stands out is when somebody is disruptive, having people who are able to neutralize that so that those disruptive people don't take over. And I don't have a word for it, but I just feel like the belonging cues for different groups are going to be different. And I'm curious about what those are.
Thank you. Marcella?
I would say for me, it's clarity of intention and clarity of boundaries.
I like that. Who else? We have some things in the chat. Safety, suspension of judgment, honoring different perspectives. Asia.
For me, I guess I would say just mindfulness around our social location within the group. So how those power dynamics play out based around race or gender. So just really being able to see, like creating a space for all requires everybody to kind of examine where they are in that group. Yeah.
Who else? We have some more raised hands. Kayla?
Sorry, my video is being kind of weird, but I think when I'm in a space, anytime my pronouns are asked for, I automatically just feel a little bit safer, and I feel like it's someone that is going to honor everybody, all of the individuals in the group.
I like that. Who else would like to share before we move on? I welcome all of you to speak, be heard.
I put honesty in the chat.
Honesty.
Yeah, I think it's important that we explain the space and to make everyone feel comfortable in the space.
I would ask for active, deep listening, no fixing, no resolving, but being present with our experience, the experience of Black, Indigenous people of color. No fixing with some other religion or spiritual practice where you're making it about you and your guruism.
Thank you for sharing that.
Hi, this is Krista. I added agreements. I think it's really helpful when we have a policy or we have like a known set of agreements and like we're all on board with these agreements.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can proceed, and sort of helps to set the tone. It lets people know where the boundaries are, what the expectation is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you
Thanks.
for sharing that.
Thank you.
One more person.
I was going to say like an openness to learn and to change.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, all of you, for sharing those, because I think it's important to recognize there isn't one way, right? We didn't do this. I didn't do this workshop because I think I have the 5 ways to make people of color feel safe, right? I think it's that I have some ways that I think will help people of color feel safe. More than that, I want to gather people that have these conversations so that we are all collectively helping each other figure this out. So I'm going to share my screen again. And I'm guessing we can all see this. Shannon, I can only see your face right now, so if you nod your head, then yes. Okay, cool. So how can we make our platforms safer? And so when I thought about this, I thought about where we spend most of our time. And I find that most of our time is spent on, outside of Zoom and work and our regular news inquiry, it's on social media platforms. And so when I think about how much time is spent on those platforms and the people that are looking and scrolling through, I think it's important to think how we can make that space safe. So one is to promote joy and not just pain. And this to me is really important. I think on the side of our allies, I think it's important for them to recognize, for you to recognize, those of you who are on this call. And I've said this, with other workshops, that we are not just slaves or freedom fighters, that there is so much joy to us. And so it is important, I think, that we are sharing things that highlight who we are as humans and not just who we are in suffering. I think that when we ask other people to show up for us, I don't believe that this is fair, but I do believe there is a such thing as fatigue. And that it's important that we don't ask the people who we are asking to support us to only see the sides of us that signify that we are less than, that we are using our own platforms and that our allies use their platforms to highlight people of color who are doing things besides just being arrested or being murdered or protesting. I think it's important for people of color to be able to see that mirror in ourselves. I think that for us to be scrolling through and to only see us suffering is damage to our own psyche. And so I think it's important to not just lean into the beauty, but to post our own beauty and to be aware of what becomes what becomes micro trauma for people as they are scrolling through, because that's unfortunately what most of us are just doing all day. To do your research, to know that if what you are posting is true, right? That we are not just highlighting what is performative or what is going to incite rage or incite an emotion, or that's going to get us more followers or likes, but that we are posting what is true and what is true to ourselves. To monitor your comments. And I know that this is an extra task to take on. I know that some people have hundreds of comments and that feels ridiculous. I know that there are things that we can be doing, but I also know that what's true is, as a Black woman, when I scroll through people's feed, I can't help but notice their comments. And when I notice that people have left things that are against me and people who look like me, when people are attacking the person who has posted this, calling them a name that they would probably call me to my face, it is hard to just keep scrolling. And so I make it an effort to, on my own pages, when I post something that I know might be triggering for the person who's a little crazy by the color of my skin, that I monitor what's being posted in my comments, and that I erase, that I block. I don't feel the need to engage with every crazy online, but I can make my page not a space for you to voice yourself. I don't think it's about limiting free speech. It's about understanding that your space is your space. And so you are responsible for making it safe. Something else that I think is important is to uplift other safe spaces. So what I notice is there is a lot of this uplift and amplify Black voices. And I think that's amazing, and it comes from a group of people. I think it needs to be coming from more of us. I think this goes back to promoting joy and not just pain. When you know of a space that makes you feel good, sharing that with your platform, your colleagues, your friends. So again, we are leaning into what feels good, because we can't escape all of the other stuff. The news is going to tell us what feels bad, right? We as people of color know exactly how this feels without having to turn on the television at all. As allies of people who are people of color, we know how much pain they're in. And so to constantly be reminded is not always necessary. It doesn't mean that you're running from the truth. It doesn't mean turn your page into a Care Bear page. It doesn't mean that we're ignoring what we want to do, which is protest and act and rally together to support each other. But we can diversify what we're sharing and what we're viewing and what we're ingesting. So one of the things that I'd like to do now is to go with this uplift other safe spaces by sharing spaces in our chat that we deem as safe spaces. So this could be an activist page, but it also could be a page, like I was gonna think about Black Girls Can Heal, right? I love their page. It's a beautiful page for women who are people who are of color. These are spaces that we want to share with each other. What I'm going to do after this is save this chat and email this to all of us so that we can all have this list, so that we can diversify our feeds and our platforms, and that we can share with each other and with others who is bringing joy into our lives. So let's use the chat feature. Chat in some pages. Let's hear what was making you feel good. Where do you go when you want to see people of color supported? What's bringing you joy? And again, you don't have to write these down. I'm gonna send this to all of you so that everyone has this. Feel free to be reading through as we are sitting here. I think these spaces are vital. I think it's important for us to add in some feel good. I think joy is resistance. I think supporting people in joy is resistance. Oh, Jessamine, I love Jessamine. She's phenomenal. And Lizzo. Yeah. I'm also just very excited to read through all these so I can add them to my own platform. If there's a musician, if there's a photographer, if there's an artist, we'll give the chat 2 more minutes. And you can chat in more than one thing. Messina in a bottle. I've ordered a few of her shirts. They are wonderful. If you want to walk around with a message, she's the lady. So I'm going to let you guys continue to put things into the chat. Again, I'm going to make sure to send this out to everybody, and we're going to move on to our next slide. What I think we're talking about here is that we are learning to become intentional about the support of the holistic health of people of color. That it's not just about the physical body, but it's what we're feeding ourselves mentally that feeds into what's happening emotionally, that's expressing itself physically. And so if we can start in the beginning, then we can help each other and heal each other whole. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about is the idea of ritual. And because so many of us are sitting at home, because so many of us have workspaces that are now in home, is how can we create ritual around this idea of having safe spaces so that I can move through my day and through what's happening online while remaining at peace and sane. So continue to chat away. Creating ritual at home. So I don't know about you, but I have started to move my computer into my bed. I sit there and work. I sit on the floor and work. What I find is, one, by not having a set space, it's blending too much of what's happening into the world into my home and into what has usually been my safe space. When I've gone out to work previously and then come home, that felt like a boundary, right? It felt like I'm gonna leave this outside, and now it feels like everything is inside. And so I've tried to start creating rituals around my workday. And one of them is that I have to, before I sign on, move my body. Now for me, that's yoga, because I feel like what's happening right now, and this could be anything for you, I feel that the world is moving fast, even though we're sitting slow. And so in order for me to check in with myself, I need to be doing slower things, slower movement, so that I can slow my brain down, so that I can figure out where I am and what I need. But whatever feels good for you, it's about moving your body. One is that the second thing is that I sit at my computer, and before I sign on, I do breath work. And so we're going to do some breath work right here together now. And then we'll move on to the next. So sitting nice and tall and eyes closed. This is something I like to practice before I sign on. It's super simple. Let's put your hands on your belly. And even though the hands are on the belly, try to let the arms and the shoulders relax. And let the muscles of the face relax. Imagine your belly to be like a balloon. So on your inhale, your balloon, your belly gets big and puffs out into your hands. And on your exhale, your belly comes back towards you. The hands come back towards you, like you're deflating a balloon. Take 5 breaths that way. After the 5th breath, with the eyes closed, repeat to yourself mentally, this is a safe space. This is a safe space. This is a safe space. And then gently open the eyes and return the breath to normal. For me, that's how I center myself before starting. Because if I try to start with the noise of my home and the noise of my partner, maybe you have children at home and even more family at home, maybe it's just the noise of the day before or the noise of the news. If I don't take a moment to center myself, it becomes just continued micro trauma throughout the day, right? Because I haven't taken a moment to say, I can do this. This is my safe space. No matter what I scroll past or see, I'm going to try my best to not internalize this, or at least start off on a stronger foot. Aromatherapy sounds silly, but again, it's about creating a ritual to keep yourself in a bubble and not so impacted by what's happening on the outside. And so for me, that's incense. Maybe for you, it's a candle. Maybe it's essential oil that you burn. Maybe you like to just make coffee because you love the smell of it. I have a friend that literally makes bacon all day. Totally weird, but it makes her feel very at home. It's like her comfort thing. She gives it to, I don't even know, but smells that make you feel comfortable, that can distract you from what's happening online, that bring you back tactically to a place that feels comfortable. Healthy snacks near a computer, again, sounds silly, but we're talking about holistic health, right? We're talking about that we're living in an era of not only just a civil rights movement, but a pandemic. And so your immunity is important. You being able to breathe correctly is vital. You being able to support the stress of outside life by what you're eating internally is just a good move. Now, I don't mean to say give up pizza, ice cream, and all those things. I also eat them. I just mean add in some things that make you feel light, that don't make you want to take a nap, that give you a little bit of energy so that you can continue on with what is a heavy day and a heavy week and a heavy month. Cleansing your space after signing off. So when I used to come home from work, I would light Palo Santo or sage at my front door. And I would run it around my head and my space. And that was my like, whoo, I am back in here. I'm leaving everything out there. Now most of us are sitting in our living rooms or our dining rooms or in our kitchens. But when I sign off, I try to cleanse my space. And maybe that's just 3 more breaths. Maybe it is Palo Santo and sage. Maybe it's about opening a window and waving my arms around. Whatever it is, it's a physical expression of I am done with this today. I am moving on to the next thing that supports me. Moving your body again, right? We are sitting all the time. To get back into bringing the spine backwards into sitting up tall. Now, this might sound like, okay, I'm just talking about your posture, but really I'm not. I'm talking about your breath, right? A hunched spine, a hunched body means breath that doesn't move. It means hip pain and knee pain after time. It is impossible to stay strong in our resistance when our bodies don't feel good. So what might seem silly is really your way of staying strong enough to combat what's happening on a day-to-day basis outside of your home. Breath work before bed, because most of us are having trouble sleeping. And sleep is affecting our immunity. We need our immunity to stay alive. We need our immunity to resist and to fight and to be clear and present. And so again, practicing breath work to balance the nervous system, to calm ourselves, to put us in the right space for breath. Now you just did 30 seconds of breath work. It was five of them. And maybe you were done with that and you were like, that was terrible, I felt nothing. But maybe you had a couple of moments of, okay, I feel a little bit calmer. Imagine if you practice that every night. All of this are practices, right? What I am hoping that we all take from this is that we're in this together. That we are in this together as people of color, or we are in this together as allies who are supporting people of color, but we are dealing with not just the outside world, but also with what's happening internally. And if we can help each other through this, if we can heal each other, if we can help direct each other to what feels good, I think that we have our best chance of making this out with our whole self. And so there's a picture that I'd like to share with you because I think it's really beautiful. I think I have to stop recording to minimize and get to it, but I will. I'm also going to put up my info at the end of this, but I want to thank all of you for joining in for this and for taking this time. I hope that we can use the chat that I'll email to you for you to switch up your own things that you're looking at, for you to send to other people so that they know who to look to. I hope that some of these rituals are things that you start to bring into your own home and into your day, and that we start to hold each other and ourselves responsible for who comes to our pages, who comes into our online spaces. Thank you again. So we're going to take 3 breaths to end this. In through the nose and out through the mouth. And we're going to move our arms this time. So inhaling up. Good. Exhale out. Inhale up. Exhale out. One more time. Inhale up. And exhale out. Good. Let's all unmute ourselves. We have some time before I switch to just putting up my info up. So if anyone would like to share anything or ask any questions or just wants to, I like calling it word vomit. That might be a little gross, but if you just like to do that, I'm here.
Ask a question in this beautiful space that you've just created in the space of silence. Sorry to ruin the silence, but thanks for offering to take a question or two.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you think about if you're creating a space, I don't know if you have any opinion about creating spaces that are for people of color only versus groups that are kind of mixed groups. If there's different thoughts you have about how to create safe spaces in those two different situations.
I think they're both important. I think that, you know, so one of my roles is the director of BIPOC wellness or well-being for the dinner party. And what we did recently was send out a survey to our community, specifically to the people of color, to ask them. And if you're not familiar with the dinner party, it is an organization for people in their 20s and 30s. I just turned 40, so obviously we're also accepting people in their 40s, but who have suffered significant loss, right? And in the physical space, we connect people across the world with 10 to 12 people, and they're able to sit and bond over grief. What we've done in this new, I call it the reset, I try not to use the word pandemic, in this reset is that we connect people virtually. And so it doesn't matter where you live, you though are matched by your loss type and often by your age sometimes. When we asked people of color what they needed, 90% of our surveys came back that they wanted spaces that were for people of color only. And I think what we recognized in that, and it's not that that was everybody, but it was a large amount, I think what we recognized in that, specifically around the grief conversation, was how much are people holding back from being able to express themselves honestly because they are holding on to, this is my support group, right? This is who I need for grief, and so I'm going to ignore what she just said to me. And so there are people that need to exist in spaces where they don't have to toe the line, where they don't have to worry about defending themselves or teaching you or making you feel better about how this racism makes you feel. I think it's vital for those spaces to exist. But I think it's important to sit in spaces that are of our allies and our people of color, because that's how we learn and unlearn, and that's how we grow. What I think is important about that is to notice who is facilitating those spaces, and for those people to be super clear on where they stand, right? That they have to know where they stand on anti-racism. They have to know where they stand on, if somebody says something, how do I interject? That it can't just be, I created a space and I'm going to bring people together and this is just going to work. That your work becomes much more involved because you are taking the responsibility of the people of color who are now sitting in your space. I think there has to be awareness in this time that we are super sensitive, and that there's going to have to be, as a white ally, as a white person, get over your ego in this space. Because outside of this just being uncomfortable, we are in danger. And so there has to be a recognizing and an awareness of, these people are in danger. The support they need is bigger than I even think it can be. And in this space, am I willing to make perhaps my other white allies, white counterparts, white colleagues uncomfortable so that I can be responsible for the safety of these people when they're with me? Thank you, Brad. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Okay, no one else?
I have a thought.
Oh, yes, please go ahead. Bunny, I think?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. I have a thought. It's not fully formed yet, but I'm observing how I feel safer in this space.
Mm-hmm.
Partially because you mirror me, but
Mm-hmm.
also partially because you're the facilitator and I have trust in your ability to do that, and because this is your presentation. So there's not equal ability for everybody to take over and, you know, chime in. It's under your leadership. And I don't know, as somebody who has participated and facilitated masterminds that didn't function that way, I'm just noticing that there's a difference there, that I'm feeling safer in this environment where I don't have to essentially manage so many different personalities.
That's important to share, right? I think that and I don't want to speak for anyone, but I'm facilitating this, so I guess I will, is that it's exhausting, right? It's exhausting to sit in spaces where I have to not only deal with what I'm going through, but now I have to manage your reaction to what I'm going through. And I think sometimes that happens in spaces that are facilitated by people who are not of color but want to speak to this, is that it becomes a self-help exercise for people who are not people of color. And I think that might make people who are not of color uncomfortable, and that might rub you a little wrong, but that's why we're here, right? To figure out how to figure this out. Brad, I can't read everything because of my screen and not knowing how to work it. Hold on, let's see. Do you think it's mandatory before people hold a space that the leader of that space has some kind of training, even when creating space is important and not everyone can have adequate training? Yeah, it's like a weird thing sometimes, because we've thought about this, you know, in other organizations I've worked in, is do you require the person who's leading it to have training? And I think in this time, yes. I think we can all come to this being like, I'm not racist, or I'm not biased, or I've got my shit together. And then you sit down and have conversations and you're like, maybe I'm not so unbiased, right? Maybe my Black friend just looked at me like I was crazy. Like, there are things that have become ingrained conversations and thoughts that we don't even realize sometimes are wrong. And so, yeah, I think it's important to take a training. I think it's important to take a training from a person of color. I think it's, there are a lot of trainings that happen on anti-racism by people who are not people of color. And it's not that they don't have important information to share, but you don't share my experience. And that is what is necessary to learn how to be anti-racist, is what are the people who deal with racism actually dealing with? You can't tell me that if you don't deal with it. I'm a white woman and strongly feel that woman-only spaces are critical at times. Absolutely. Like, as a woman, I love the company of my women friends, right? I love to be able to sit and shit talk a man if that's what is necessary. Sorry to all you men, but it happens. I like to be able to sit with my women friends and talk about periods and fertility and sex and work and how all of these things play into my life, right? And I want to do that without your male judgment or mansplaining or anything else that comes with you. That's what makes us feel comfortable, right? So yes, it is the same thing. It's not a like, because I don't love men, my husband's sitting 200 feet away. It's just, I don't want to deal with your shit right now while we're doing this. Right? I think it's the same thing. And I think it's important to recognize it that sometimes that way as like an ally is like, you recognize what it's like to sit with your women friends. So don't be upset when people of color say they just want to sit with themselves. Right? You like, mothers recognize I like being in mommy only groups sometimes, right? There are wives that like just being with wives sometimes. Like, all of these things happen because we like sitting with our mirrors. So ignoring that and being upset by it, silly. Who else? I like this part. You can just speak out.
Hello. I was wondering, do you have any advice on like holding the container for mixed spaces, like mixed company?
In
Like how-
terms of, do you mean like the people who are in it are people of color and not people of color, or do you mean the people who are in it are of mixed race?
The first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Advice for holding the container. I think it's important to speak to the elephant in the room. I think there's nothing more uncomfortable than being like, we're all going to pretend like this isn't awkward for the people who are sitting here. Like, I think it is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for the white people who are trying to figure out how to show up for you. It is important for the Black people who are waiting for somebody to say something nuts. It is, everybody is uncomfortable, right? It is only by speaking to that I think people become comfortable. I think it's by saying things like, we are not going to get this all right, right? I am not the perfect person to speak to this, but I'm going to try my best. I think when we say things like, if there is something that I have said that has triggered you or upset you, please let me know. And being open to that criticism, right? Because that's how your next space becomes safer than the space before it. I think I think if you are a person who is not a person of color leading that space, I think it's important to have a person of color with you. And I don't mean to have your like Black Robin to your Batman, but I think it's important for people to see, that there's a person of color who's also involved in this. That would be kind of a few tips. I think the more open you are and vulnerable you are, the easier you make it for people. I think it's when we show up in these spaces and we're like, I figured this out and I'm going to teach you how. And I think it's when we show up and don't say things like, I'm still reading and I'm still learning. you know, it's like no one is expecting you to have gotten it right. I think even as I sit here as a Black woman, and there are things I'm still learning because the education I was given was wrong. Right? There are things I'm still figuring out. There are things about myself I'm still figuring out, because now all of a sudden there's a voice and a platform and a do I speak to this? Do I keep just telling my grandma at family reunions, or do I actually tell my boss what I think? Like all of these are, I'm 40 and stepping into a new voice, right? Like we're all learning here. And so I think it's important to say that and to put people at ease that way. Yes, to Marcella.
I'm so grateful that you just said that about addressing the elephant in the room, because sometimes I've felt like we're all kind of skirting each other, and yet here we are honestly trying to like break that space apart so that it doesn't exist anymore. And so even just to hear you say, like, you know, that the Black people be looking like ready for, you know, us white people just to absolutely stick our foot in our mouths and say something ridiculous and stupid. And then in the meantime, the white people are being so polite and cautious and careful. And in that, we do trip over ourselves, right? So I just want to say, like, thank you for that, because that felt like a massive just opener of space right there.
Yeah, good. I mean, I would rather my white friend turn to me and be like, I don't know what to say to you, but I'm going to sit here and try to figure this out, than her turn to me and regurgitate some text she read or tell me about some documentary she watched and now we have to talk about it. Like, I would rather you turn to me and just be like, I want to be here. Tell me what you need. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, right? Let's have honest conversations. Like, again, we are not freedom fighters. Like, some of us are, but some of us are not. You know, like, we are not all poets and linguists and activists. And some of us are just navigating this water. And if we can meet each other where we are in honesty and let go of our ego, I think we have a chance to make some of these spaces much more enjoyable, productive, safe for all of us. Bunny, did you just raise your hand?
Oh, yes, I did. That whole, the three of you that just spoke just resonated, and it reminded me of something that I did in the mastermind that I was a part of with a close friend of mine for years. And it's something that you even started this whole thing with asking us to check in and share where we're at, which is to say, express your vulnerability. You know, that's another way to put it. But in our masterminds, we called it social exploding, because oftentimes we would come to the meeting and we have our agenda, but at the same time, you know, something just happened on the drive there, or we just saw something on social media, or we're still feeling something from the day before. And it's hard to get into that conversation when that's still weighing on you, whether it's happy or otherwise. So we gave ourselves a couple of minutes at the beginning of everything to just get it out there. And I think that in the context of creating safe spaces around this kind of topic, it serves the same purpose, to allow everybody in the room to say, I'm totally freaking out right now, man.
Yeah.
So we can relax that part of us that tries to manage our status within a group or try to present ourselves in a certain way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, it made me think of the idea of holding space for what Min asked about holding space for groups that are mixed specifically. Is I think that, and we touched on this in the workshop, but how people of color are showing up to your space, to your workshop, to your workday, what they are carrying is so heavy. And it is not minimizing what other people are carrying, but it's an extra layer. And so I think speaking to what Bunny just said of when you enter into that space, if there are 10 people of color and 10 white people, that those 10 people of color are like carrying 50 book bags on top of what they're sitting there with, and allowing that sort of, there are people that are really struggling right now in these conversations. And so I can't just launch into my agenda and launch into what I want to talk about, because it's not just a pandemic that people are carrying. Does that make sense? I know we're coming up close to time, but if there's one more question, I'd love to answer it. You can just yell out. Okay. Well, thank you again for joining. What I'm going to do is leave you, hopefully, with this picture that I love of a quote that I follow often. And I'm going to put on some music, and you guys can sit in the space if you'd like to and just let the music play. But I really want to thank you for taking this time. I will also put up a screen of how you can contact me if you have any questions, or if you just like to stay in touch, and where I am online. And I will send out that chat of all of the sites and stuff that bring us joy so that we can all share those. Okay, so namaste, first of all.
Sorry to break in at the last second.
That's okay.
Could you include in the chat all of your contact points as well for you?
Yes.
You said you put them on the screen, but if you could email them to us, like how
Yes.
we follow you and everything.
Yeah, when I send out all of those sites, I'll put my own stuff up, and then I'll also share it in this slide.
Thank you.
But I'm so happy to see you all, and thank you for joining. And let me put up a slide and stop recording and see if I can do this.